Hey, what's going on, AP people? We have a quick video for you today on Manifest Destiny, one of the biggest topics from the mid 19th century and one of the causes of the Civil War, as you will see. So let's get started. All right, let's talk about what Manifest Destiny is. Well, it's the belief that it was America's God given right to expand from coast to coast, to go all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And here is a very popular, well known political cartoon, or painting, I should say, that depicts Manifest Destiny. You see an angel here going across, and you see all these people moving to the left or to the west on a map. And you can see lots of people packing up and moving out west. And this was a term that was created by a newspaper journalist, John Sullivan. So what time period is it associated with? Well, it's usually associated with the 1840s and the 1850s, so in the decade or two before the Civil War. However, it does have roots in the Louisiana Purchase and the Indian Removal Act. Remember, the Louisiana Purchase was in 1803, and that doubled the size of the U.S. So the U.S. was getting closer to the Pacific Ocean. So some key associations with Manifest Destiny you should know. First one is Oregon. The second one is Texas. And the third one is the Mexican-American War, and we'll talk about each one of those, beginning with Oregon. So at one time, four different countries are going to claim the Oregon Territory. We have Spain, Britain, Russia, and the U.S. Now, over time, two of these countries will bow out of there, and that includes Spain and Russia, so we're just left with Britain and the United States. And the boundary was not settled between the U.S. and Great Britain, who is in Canada at that time. So President Polk, when he was running for president in 1844, campaigned on a slogan 54-40 or fight, meaning that the U.S. wanted up to the 54th parallel or they would fight Great Britain. However, 2 years later in office, the two sides settle on the 49th parallel. So let's take a look at this. Everything in yellow is the Oregon Territory. Way up here is the 54-40, and Polk wanted every single little bit of this that's in yellow up here. Eventually, though, the two sides settle on the 49th parallel, and it continues the northern boundary between Canada and the United States at the 49th parallel. So the U.S. does gain most of this yellow Oregon Territory, but not the full thing that Polk campaigned on. All right, let's do a quick recap of Texas. In 1836, Texas declared independence from Mexico, and in the 1844 presidential campaign, the number one issue was Texas, and it's between these two people, Henry Clay and James K. Polk. Take a minute and think, who do you think has worse hair here? I'm going to go with Clay because I think mullets are making a comeback, and they're pretty sweet haircuts, but Clay's is like somebody put a bowl on his head and just cut around it. So know this, that Democrats favored expansion, and James K. Polk from the beginning advocated the annexation of Texas. Henry Clay, what ultimately probably did him in and why he lost the election, was that he flip-flopped on the issue of Texas. Came out and said he was against it, then about a week later he said, no, I'm for it, and most Americans, or certainly a lot of them, were in favor of the annexation of Texas. So that probably is why Polk ends up winning the 1844 election. In 1845, Texas is annexed via a joint resolution. A treaty is normally how land is added, and that would require two-thirds of the Senate to approve. And a joint resolution simply requires more than half, both the House and the Senate, to approve it. Southerners favored the admission of Texas as a way to expand slavery, and the boundary was not settled by both the U.S. and Mexico. So everywhere that's in green is kind of this disputed territory, especially down here between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande River. This is going to be a huge cause of the Mexican-American War because both sides are going to claim this land down here. And this helps lead to the, I just said it, Mexican-American War. So let's talk about some causes. Well, the number one cause is this Texas boundary issue. Another one is that Mexican and American soldiers fight in that disputed territory, and President Polk claims that there is American blood that was spilled on American soil. So some effects. America ends up winning. The U.S. gains the Mexican cession. Let's take a look at this map, and you'll notice that all of this land over here in the dark gray is gained by the U.S. Not this dark gray, almost black color down here. That's the Gadsden Purchase that comes later. But this chunk of land right here, the U.S. gains, and it increases the size of the U.S. by 1/3. And now, after the Mexican-American War, the U.S. is fully expanded from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and Manifest Destiny is essentially complete. The other thing that is in effect is that slavery would be the number one topic for the next 15 years until the Civil War. And one example of this is the Wilmot Proviso, which occurs during and after the Mexican American Wars. Is introduced actually several times into Congress by this guy, David Wilmot. He wanted to keep slavery out of the Mexican cession. So this was a bill that was introduced into Congress several times. It passes the House multiple times, but it never passes the Senate because the South rejects it. The senators from the South reject it. So this never becomes a law, but this idea will really stick around for a long time. Many people will try to keep the Mexican cession land free from slavery. All right, impacts of Manifest Destiny. Let's talk about Native Americans. Unfortunately for them, they continually lost land and were pushed further and further west. This really began with the Trail of Tears in 1838 and the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And eventually, later on in the 19th century, they're going to be forced on reservations, and their way of life is going to be completely changed. The impacts of Manifest Destiny on slavery, as I mentioned, thrust the issue of slavery into the national spotlight and really became the number one issue leading up to the Civil War. This is because there's a debate about whether this new land should be free or slave. Let's talk about the impacts on politics. I mentioned the Wilmot Proviso. We also have the birth of a new political party in the 1850s, the Republican Party. And the first Republican president was Abe Lincoln. And one of the platforms of the Republican Party was to keep slavery from expanding. Please know this, guys. Abe Lincoln did not campaign on abolishing slavery. Rather, he campaigned on keeping slavery from expanding. It was fine where it was, but it better not spread whatsoever. All right, there's the video for you on Manifest Destiny. I hope that helped. If not, please feel free to leave some comments or questions below. Please take a moment and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Help me spread the word. If you know anybody who would benefit from this, please let them know. I appreciate you guys watching, and have a good day, guys.